Okay, welcome back. This is the module where things should start to really take shape using most of the tools we've gone through in previous modules to really start taking sounds to the next level. So let's get straight into it.
Sylenth 1 offers a wide range of modulation methods, all of which are found just above the keyboard on the interface, and generally split into three sections: the modulation envelope, the LFO, and the miscellaneous modulation panel. Put simply, the term modulation is used when the output signal from one device is being affected by another signal being generated elsewhere in the device. For example, when the main oscillator is being modulated by the output levels of another oscillator. The most basic and most important modulations on any subtractive synthesizer are the envelope controls known as ADSR, found here. ADSR stands for attack, decay, sustain, and release. Let's take a look at the amplitude envelope in the oscillator section, which controls the volume of the oscillators. For reasons you'll see in a moment, I'm going to start with the sustain level. The sustain is essentially the final signal level, as it's the level you get when you hold down a note. By default, it's at 100% or max volume, so let's hear that. Now if I drop it down to about 50%, you'll hear the difference now. Now let's put it back up to 100% and move on to the attack. The attack actually controls the amount of time it takes from pressing a note to the moment it reaches full signal level, or sustain, which is dictated by the sustain level. So if I press a note with the attack at 0 here, it sounds like this. You can hear that it jumps straight up to max level, but when I raise the attack by about 25%, you'll get more of a fade in, so it sounds like this. And with the attack at an even higher value, the fade is even greater, so it sounds like this. Now let's set that back to 0 and move on to the decay. The decay level sets the amount of time that the signal takes to reach the sustain amount. So let's bring the sustain down to 0% first and hear that. You'll notice there's now no sound coming out, and that's because the decay is set to 0 too, so it takes 0 time to reach a sustain level of 0. However, let's set the decay to around 50% and hear that. Now you'll hear it takes about a second to reach the sustain level, which is 0, so we get a brief sound that takes a second to go from max volume to silence. Now if we set the decay to around 25%, the fade out will be even shorter, so it sounds like this. These are the sorts of ADSR settings you should use when trying to create short stabbing sounds. Now moving straight on to the release control, this is for setting the amount of time it takes for the oscillator to reach a signal level of 0 from the sustain level. Let's reset the decay back to 0 and the sustain to 100% again. And now the sound is instantly at full level when I press a note like this. And when I let go of the note, you can hear that the level dropped instantly to silence. Now let's increase the release to around 50%, and you'll hear it take around a second to reach 0 again, like this. And now increasing it to a larger amount, there'll be an even longer trail of sound at the end of each note, a bit like reverb, like this. In the case of Sylenth 1's envelope modulation, each source signal can be linked to two different parameters to effect, which can be selected using the pop-up menus that appear when you click them here. You can also adjust the amount of modulation for each parameter by using the rotary dials next to each destination display. Just to be clear, there is no modulation when the rotary dial is in the middle, and moving it clockwise makes a positive modulation, and moving it anti-clockwise makes a negative modulation. We'll look at this in more detail later on. So let's start with the modulation envelope on the left-hand side of the modulation panel, here under the title of Mod Env 1. Once again, you have the ADSR sliders, and these are often used to modulate either the filter cutoff or the pitch, for example. Let's assign the envelope to pitch by clicking this drop-down menu and selecting Pitch AB, and then let's adjust the attack slider to maximum, and then the dial to the left of it all the way down. This means that we're modulating the pitch in a negative or downwards direction with a very slow attack. So when we press a key now, the pitch modulates like this. So we got to slide down to a much lower value, which eventually reaches the sustain level, which is currently set at 0. The length of slide is controlled by the attack amount, so we can set this to a smaller value, say 65%, to make the slide quicker, and it sounds like this. The decay then sets the length of time it takes to go from the end of the attack to the sustain level, which means we can create 2 pitch slides, one right down to the bottom and then one up to the sustain. So let's set the decay to about 35%, and let's hear that. You'll notice that when I change the release setting that I don't actually hear any difference right now when I let go of the note like this. This is because the amplitude envelope has no release, and this is controlling the level. So if you want to set a release in one of the mod envelopes, then you need to remember to apply some in the amp envelope too. Let's set the mod env release back to 0, and now slide the amp envelope release to 65% and press a short note like this. Now you can hear the sound is fading out, and because the mod envelope has no release setting, the pitch of the note is jumping straight back up to the played pitch for that fade out. But if I increase the mod envelope release to about 40%, then we can make the pitch slide back up like this. And if I set the modulation amount in a positive direction, then the pitch slides all invert, so we get a totally opposite effect like this. Now let's set the direction all the way in the negative direction again, and I'm going to show you a totally different use of the modulation envelope, and that's to control the filter cutoff. So I'll change the modulation parameter to select cutoff AB. Now I'll apply a low pass filter up here, and turn the drive up to the maximum. And now set the filter control down here to 0, which will mean the filter is removing all of the high frequencies, so we just have the lowest bass and the filter has more impact or punch. So you won't hear much when I play a note now like this. But if I turn up the envelope modulation amount to the max positive direction, then we'll be modulating the filter cutoff in an upwards direction, so the high frequencies are brought back in, creating a cool filter sweep when I play a note like this. You can hear that setting an attack or decay creates a very different sound, with one opening the filter and one closing it. A classic wah-wah filter is made by having a filter that is constantly opening to create that repeating wah sound, which you can hear when I set an attack amount with the length of the attack defining how long the wah lasts for, like this. Whereas having no attack and a decay instead, with no sustain, will make the filter close to produce the opposite ow effect like this. Now let's add to this sound by giving both oscillators 8 voices of saw wave. And now oscillator 1 to octave -1, and let's hear that. Then lift the second oscillator by 4 semitones, and let's hear that. And if we detune that by about 40% to add some more width, and now set a short attack of about 10% and a long decay of about 75%, and we've instantly made an interesting and somewhat evolving thick pad sound like this. As there are 2 modulation envelopes, we can now set the second one to affect the pitch AB, and just set the dial up a couple of degrees, So we'll just get a small modulation of the pitch of both parts, and then raise the attack to about 40% and the decay to about 40% too. Now you'll notice the sound becomes really interesting when you hold down a note, like this. What we're hearing is the pitch of the tones being modulated up and down by the attack and decay levels before finally levelling out to remain constant.
So now you should have a good understanding of what modulation is and what potentials it has to offer to anyone wanting to be a little bit more creative with their sound design. In the next module, I'm going to be talking about the other envelope filters and LFOs, so I'll see you then.